I'm Polly Warren and welcome to the Positive Perimenopause podcast. This is the place for some positive inspiration to help you through the rollercoaster ride of perimenopause. I truly believe that with the right support, knowledge and wellness tools, you can feel your best yet, because I'm learning this life phase can be a truly exciting and often pivotal time of life. With every episode, my mission is to support and empower you to own your menopause, because it's time to start taking care of the most important person, and yes, that's you. So thank you for being here and sharing your time with me. Now let's dive in. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. How are you doing? Hope you're really well. I have had a really lovely weekend, actually. I had my eldest came back home for a few nights. So it was so lovely. I hadn't realised quite how much I'd missed him until I saw him. So that was really lovely. Although when you say hello, you've got to say goodbye again. Although I am off next weekend for the weekend with my middle son. We're off to Newcastle to go and visit the uni there. And we're going to drop by Durham for a night. So I get to hang out with him for a second weekend and with both my boys at the same time. So really looking forward to that. And I suppose it's just a real reminder that you just got to enjoy every moment of them, even when sometimes teenagers can be challenging at times. Actually, they've gone before you know it. And I don't think I ever really appreciated that until now. Anyway, on to this week's episode, which is a really good one. I really enjoyed this week's episode. I speak to the absolutely brilliant Jo Moseley. Now, in the summer of 2019, at the age of 54, Jo became the first woman to stand up paddleboard coast to coast across the UK. That's 162 miles from Liverpool to Goole. And on the way, she was picking up litter, she was fundraising for the Wave Project and the 2-Minute Beach Clean Foundation. Jo had never done anything like this before, and she tells us the whole story in this episode, which honestly is it's so good. She made a film about her adventure, which is called Brave Enough, which I really do recommend you go and watch. It had me in tears by the end of it. Today, Jo still makes award-winning films about joy, about adventure, and about finding your purpose. She's also written 2 books about paddleboarding. She has spoken at prestigious adventure festivals, at wellbeing events, and she's been on many podcasts. Jo's story has also been featured in the national press, on the radio, on TV, and she has a podcast called The Joy of Sup. Now, I share all of this with you because this just goes to show what is possible for you at any time in your life. And I just couldn't agree more with the message that Jo has on her website, which says, we're not too old and it's never too late to have an adventure, to create a fresh start and make a difference. So, without further ado, please welcome the utterly brilliant Jo Moseley. I am delighted today to have Jo Moseley with me on the podcast. I'm so looking forward to this conversation, Jo. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much. I'm very honoured. Thank you.
As I was just saying to you, I'm a little bit husky, a little bit croaky today because I was celebrating my 50th birthday and my 22nd wedding anniversary, actually, all at the same time at the weekend. So yes, apologies for my huskiness, but I think my voice is going to hold out.
Hey, that's lovely.
Oh, thank you. Now, Jo, I watched your incredible film, Brave Enough, I watched it yesterday, and I found myself at many points becoming really quite tearful. And at the end, I just had tears streaming down my face because it just pulled all my heartstrings. And I just loved the story of this woman who was achieving something so incredible in her 50s. And I just thought it was just brilliant. So I really, really want to dive into all of that in this conversation. But first of all, I would just love to really hear about you. You know, have you always been adventurous from a young age?
Wow, thank you. That's so kind of you to say that about the film. I think I was as a child, and then sort of lost it as a teenager, then was in my 20s, and then pretty much lost it again in my 30s and 40s. And then really in my 50s decided to, like many women, I think the perimenopause comes along. And for me, certainly it kind of cracked me open. And it came hot on the heels of a divorce, being a single mum, and my dad being diagnosed with his first cancer, and then subsequently his second and third, and my mum being diagnosed and then dying. So it all happened all at the same time. And so life just literally cracked me open. But in the piecing it all back together again, I think I just rediscovered parts of me that I had lost or forgotten about, or been too afraid to really explore, or felt it was too selfish to explore, or, all those things, and I'd certainly lost a lot of courage. So it was just piecing it back together, and it was both new and exciting, but also incredibly familiar. So it was both those things. And just piecing myself back together and finding out what brought me joy, and just keeping on following that journey, really. So
and I think it's such a common story, isn't it, that as we go through life, and particularly perhaps as you find a partner, you have children, you have a family, and we've got so many other things we need to put our focus onto, like particularly with kids and work and keeping everything afloat. That as women, particularly, I think we lose what gives us joy, because we're just trying to do everything else for everybody else. And actually those things which give us joy seem to sort of slowly go to the bottom of the pile. And I think when we get to that point, as you say, where actually we might be able to, we feel like we need to have some of that joy in our lives, we've actually forgotten almost what those things are. I mean, it's really sad. It's really very sad, isn't it?
I mean, outside obviously being a mum, which is always, my greatest joy, that my boys are now 26 and 22 and sort of tower above me. But outside of that, I had lost what it meant to be joyful just as a woman on her own. What made me joyful, I'd really just literally forgotten. And I think I had forgotten that sort of joy muscle, really. I couldn't remember. I couldn't really remember. And also I'd lost so much confidence and so much courage that I didn't really think that I had anything to offer the world. And so it was just piecing myself back together and starting to find out what might bring me joy, but also trying to find out what value I might be in the world outside of being a mum and a daughter and a sister. So so I rediscovered something that was already there. I think it's I can't remember who said it, but it's not necessarily a rediscovery. It's more an excavation. It's just like going back and thinking all these piles of sort of sadness really had kind of gone on top of that joy, and it was excavating it and finding it again. It was already there. It was always been there. I just needed to rediscover it.
It's like peeling back the layers of the onion, isn't it? It's like seeing what is there, because we pile on all this stuff as we go through life. And
so and the perimenopause was part of that, just because I felt so ill and so broken, and it was like, well, what more can come along and break me? And so I guess I'd been kind of trundling on as a single mum, and then Dad got his diagnosis, and then Mum got her diagnosis, and then just sort of trundling along. And then the perimenopause came and just sort of said, right, you just can't trundle along anymore. You just can't keep doing that. And so I always say it brought me to my knees when I was already down, and then I had to do something. I had to do something about looking after myself, which I wasn't even on the list. Never mind at the top of the priority list. I wasn't even on the list. So,
and sadly, I think that is the case with so many women. So and I'm sure there's women listening to this now who that is the case for. In terms of perimenopause, Jo, how did that show up for you?
The symptoms that mainly I had, I think for about 2 years prior to realizing what was going on, I thought that I was constantly getting flu. So I would go to bed at night and say to the boys, I'm going to have to go to bed because I'm going to get flu. And my anxiety was, if I get flu, I might be off work for a couple of days. And as I say in the film, and then something will go wrong and they'll sack me. I mean, they weren't going to sack me, but, I'll take 2 days off work and then they'll sack me and then we'll lose our home and all this sort of stuff. So I had cold flushes and headaches and achy joints and muscles. And so I just thought, well, I'm getting flu, constantly getting flu for about 2 years. And I would go to bed at night and then I'd wake up in the morning and think, oh, I feel fine now. That's amazing. But it was actually just a combination of these symptoms. Anxiety overload, complete anxiety overload. As I said, one light bulb would go in the house and within 10 seconds, I could go from a light bulb blowing to the house needs rewiring. I can't afford to rewire it, we'll be out in the streets. And that would be in 10 seconds. There was no logic. Itchy skin, really achy joints, tinnitus, just complete overwhelm and no sleep, no sleep. And so I carried on like this for ages. And, even my mouth hurt, everything just ached. And then I had this moment, which, we call the hobnob moment, where I just broke down in Tesco's and just looked at this packet of hobnobs and thought, how did my life get to this? I'm literally crying in the supermarket. And I am a very fair crier. I've cried in almost every supermarket at different times. I think it's only Lidl I probably haven't. But I remember once being in the Waitrose cafe in Otley, just crying and crying. And these two women came up to me who, reflecting upon it now, were a bit older than me, and they said, we don't know what's going on, but it will get better. And I thought that was so kind of them.
And what age were you at this point?
So at this point, the hobnob moment happened sort of 10 years ago in May, so I would have been 48.
Okay.
I'd probably had symptoms for a couple of years before that, but not realizing it. And so at that point, I just sort of said to the boys, I can't cope. And I don't know what it was I couldn't cope with it, other than just life, everything. And a friend lent me an indoor rowing machine and said, maybe exercise will help you sleep. She didn't say, maybe you've got, perimenopause. It wasn't even a word like 10 years ago.
No.
Nobody, nowadays you hear it all over. But then, she didn't say, oh, it could be the menopause. But it was just, I started piecing things together. And then I would read an article here and read an article there and then go, wow, this is what it is. This is what's going on. And yes, being a single mum is really hard, or it was, not necessarily for everybody, but it was for me. I had quite a lot of difficulties sort of around that.
And having parents who were unwell as well. Yeah, so you're right in the midst of it.
Yeah, they were organising their going to the hospital and trying to juggle that and the boys and all sorts of things. So just pieced it all together and then sort of went, wow, this is what it is. This is something called the perimenopause, and I thought it happened sort of like in your 60s, 70s and flushes. And because I don't get hot flushes, it just didn't occur to me that it had anything to do with that.
A very quick break to ask you to hit the follow or subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you're enjoying this episode, I'd be super grateful if you could hit those stars and rate it too. Thank you. So you got given the rowing machine by a friend who thought that might help. So her thinking was like, maybe you needed to do some exercise that might help you. Yeah. And were you doing any exercise at the time?
Well, like I said to her, I was spending a lot of time at the rugby pitch, but just standing there with the boys.
Right, okay.
I really wasn't. I've always walked. I did it, when the boys would go away at the weekends to see their father, I would walk because I found that quite a soothing thing, but nothing very deliberate or intentional. And so the rowing did help and I did start sleeping, which was amazing. And then, so that was May 2013. And then in the December 2013, so almost 10 years ago, now Mum died. Her lymphoma returned really quickly. And sort of from about this time, November 2013 to the 21st of December, she just went downhill really, really quickly. And then she died. And then it was just like, so then I had grief as well. I'm not blaming Mum by any means, but you know what I mean? I then had that on top and then hit rock bottom again. But what I realized was that the rowing was helping me with my grief as well. So that soothingness of going to this rowing machine, and I wasn't very good. And then in the May 2014, on their wedding anniversary, I decided to do this big rowing challenge. So I rowed 1 million meters and a couple of half marathons and a marathon to raise money for Macmillan in Mum's memory, and just realized that soothing nature of movement was just helping in all areas of my life. And then thought, right, well, what else can I do? Maybe I should go outside now and not just be in a gym.
Yeah. Had you ever rowed before?
No,
it was just because your friend gave you a rowing machine that you thought.
If she'd given me another piece of machinery, it would have been another piece of machinery. Literally, it was just what she gave me.
What was it that kind of made you continue to do the rowing? Was it the grief? Was it
I think
how it made you feel?
It just made me feel better doing it. There's a real rhythm to it, literally going backwards and forwards in one spot, having a purpose. Once I'd started to raise money for Macmillan, I got really into that, and we raised over £10,000.
Amazing.
Really boring, I had a lot of support on Twitter at the time, which was a really supportive platform, not like it is now. I had sort of Olympic rowers telling me, you need to do, it was all on a machine, but they were saying, oh, you need to do it this way, you need to do it that way. And so, just all of it together, purpose, community, movement. And I just started to feel a lot better. And then, as I said, sort of thought, right, maybe I'll go outside now and return to all that. So I went back to bodyboarding and swimming in the sea. So this was sort of like 2014, went back, long before, people have always swum in the sea, don't get me wrong, but before, the next big sort of flourish of everybody swimming, and then took up paddleboarding in 2016. And just, if I don't exercise much, I don't feel it on the day that I don't exercise. And when I say exercise, I like to use the word move, really. Mm-hmm. If I don't do much, it's not that day, it's like 2 or 3 days afterwards. There's that sort of lag for me. And I sort of think, oh, I feel a bit low or whatever. And then I realize, that's why it is. A lot of my symptoms have gone, which has been amazing. And I really want people to know that they do really, or they can really settle down just simply with time. Mm-hmm. And I've spoken to friends of mine, and that whole roller coaster just sort of really eases off. But I think it was just a mixture of all those different things, and also a sense of achievement that I had set my mind to something with the rowing, and I'd been brave enough to share it, as I said, on social media, and sort of say, I want to do this, and I want to do this in memory of my mum. And so, I did have a sense of achievement that I rowed so far. And
that is a long way. How long did that take you? That's a long way?
Yeah, so I started what I did, I started on their wedding anniversary, which is the 5th of May, and I completed the 1 million meters, which is about Edinburgh to Paris, on the 29th of November. And basically it was about 10,000 meters, so 10 kilometers every other night. So I'd get home from work, get the boys tea, sort them out. They were now 13, 14, 16-ish. So they, I could leave them in, and her rowing machine sort of did die. So I could go to the gym, and I'd go off to the gym and come back and do that every other night, literally for 8 months, which bizarre now, thinking how did I do that? And then did 2 half marathons, one on a bandstand in the middle of Ilkley, and then did the marathon on the first anniversary of her death, and 5 days before my 50th. So I woke up on my 50th birthday, which is Boxing Day, on my 50th birthday, with abs of steel. But
amazing.
Yeah, and it was never about that, but I just happened to have grown up, they're no longer steel. And just thinking, right, it's a new start, really. I've done what I needed to do for Mum, and see where things go from here, really. So she's never not in my thoughts, every day, and certainly this time of year is always very I was just talking to somebody at work that I always feel a bit odd from about now till just before Christmas, till the day that she died, and I sometimes wonder why I feel odd. And then suddenly on the 22nd of December, it's like I just exhale. And then I think, yeah, I've just been going through that anticipation of the anniversary and, 10 years now.
Well, what a remarkable thing to have done for her, and raising so much money, and that's really so brilliant.
She would have thought it was very odd. She would have been, why would you do something like that? Why would you exercise like that? It wasn't her thing. But I hope that to a certain degree it was, that £10,000 could make a difference for another family. So, and also say thank you for all the stuff they did for Dad as well. So
and also, as you say, I imagine, you said that sort of repetitive meditative sort of rowing technique. I'm trained in breath work, and often what they say is through the breath, through movement, and through sound is how energy which might be stuck in your body moves. So definitely through movement, it just helps move anything through, and that includes things like grief as well. It just helps get that out of you.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you noticed that in the film, I felt that there had been a lot of sadness. So I'd had the sadness of the divorce, sadness of mum dying, sadness of Dad being diagnosed, sadness of a couple of miscarriages. And that sadness had just seeped into the marrow of my bone. The very core of my bone was just sad. On a day-to-day basis, oh, no, I'm fine. Hi, how are you? That's what I'm like. Yeah, no, great, super, fantastic. Yeah, no problem. But underneath, there was just this deep sadness, and the physicalness of rowing. It felt like I know it sounds a bit woo-woo, but it felt like I had moved that sadness out of the marrow of my bones and exhaled it.
Yeah.
And I'd sort of just taken it out of my body, and my body just didn't, like, my body now can feel tired, it can feel a bit older, but it doesn't feel like a sad body anymore.
Oh, that makes total sense. Yes, I totally get that. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So after you did this rowing challenge, then how did you then end up setting yourself the challenge from paddleboarding across the UK from Liverpool to Goole?
So I then started going back to swimming and doing different things. And then I injured my knee in January 2016. And I was on crutches, and I just felt like all that sort of joy again. I knew it was temporary, but was sort of gone. And so I set myself a challenge in September 2016 that I call Rain or Shine 30, which was every day, whatever the weather was like, I was going to set myself a challenge to go outside and do some form of exercise. And it was mainly walking. And then I just read about paddleboarding. And these, 2016 is only 7 years ago, but in paddleboarding terms, that's, quite a long time ago. And so I'd seen all these pictures on Instagram of, bikinis and, Bahamas and all this stuff. And I thought, well, it sounds fun. I'm going to take a lesson. And so it was part of my Rain or Shine 30. And I took a lesson on Derwent Water, and I just remember standing up, a few wobbles and things, and standing up and thinking, this is just extraordinary. I love it. I just love it. And there's a picture of me just smiling. And so in December that year, I got a paddleboard for my Christmas and birthday present from the whole family. And I decided pretty much at that point that I was then going to set myself another big challenge. It had been a couple of years since the rowing, and I thought, I'm just going to set myself a new challenge. But the problem was, and so I was going to go from Liverpool to Leeds along the Leeds-Liverpool Canal. But the problem was I told a few people, and the response, like the Christmas parties and things, and the response was, that sounds logistically very complex. It sounds quite boring, and it also sounds too difficult for a woman of your age. And I was only coming up to 52. But I wasn't, and I'm still not the most confident of people. I think differently now, but at the time I thought, yeah, maybe they're right. Nobody had done it at that point on a paddleboard. Maybe they're right. Maybe the reason nobody's done it is because it can't be done, sort of thing. And I didn't know how I'd sort the logistics and things. And so I put the dream away. But then in the interim, in a space of 6 months, so from 2016 to 2019, in space of about 6 months, 5 girlfriends died. And they were all from different different areas of my life. So it wasn't like a gang, but they were all just the most creative. What united them was that they were the most creative women, really creative. And if you sort of met them in the street, you'd walk away thinking, God, I'm really glad I met her today. I feel a bit of a spring in my step, and some were closer, some were schoolgate mums and others much, much closer. And only one of them had reached 50. And so what I realized was that, it sounds cliche, but life is very short and very precious. And if you have the spark of a dream, you should try it. Even if you don't complete the dream, at least you should give yourself the chance to try. I think that was what it was. It was the element of trying. And I when I'd been doing the rowing, I had listened to Dolly Parton, and she had a song called Try. And I guess that was it. It was the trying I wanted to do. It wasn't necessarily the achieving. It was the giving myself the chance to do something out of the ordinary. And so January 2019, reflecting upon, my friends having died, and reflecting upon the fact that my youngest son, Johnny, would be going off to university, and his elder brother, Henry, was already doing his master's at that point. And I just thought, I can't not try. I have to try. And I really remember I'd gone for a walk and I'd seen all these geese, and it was about the middle of January. And I came home and I went onto Instagram and I found out that Mary Oliver had died. I don't know if you know her poetry. And she has a saying, what will you do with this one wild and precious life? I mean, it's slightly on that phrase. And she also had a poem about geese.
Yeah, I love that poem.
And I just thought, what am I going to do with this one wild and precious? What am I going to do with it? And I just remember saying, right, I'm going to go, and I'm going to go from Liverpool to Leeds. And you know what? I think I'll go from Leeds to Goole. I wasn't entirely sure where Goole was, but I want to get as far across the country as I can. And Goole's the most inland port on the East Coast. And so I thought, right, I'm just going to do it. And whatever anyone says, I'm going to do this 162-mile trip on my paddleboard. And I don't have a clue how I'm going to do it. I don't know if I can do it. I had a frozen shoulder at that point. I, reflect now that a lot of women get frozen shoulders, and I can see with all the estrogen going, all these things happen. I couldn't lift my arm above my head. I had plantar fasciitis, so I couldn't run. I'm not really a runner. I had a lot going against me, but I just felt like it was time to be brave and to try. Dolly Parton was ringing in my ear.
Which is amazing, though. If you think when you said that you weren't a particularly confident person, yet you had this dream. Even someone a couple of years before you had said, oh, I wouldn't do that because it's difficult, but you still had something. What, where did that come from? That thing inside you, which is like, I'm going to try.
I blame Dolly Parton. I think it was just, and also I just think when you see just how short and precious life is, when people that are so full of life and so interesting, like they were just so interesting and so creative and so unique and so different, and you just think, you can't bring them back, but you can honor their memory by being creative in your own life, and try and just do something different. And also I think that my motivation was different. I think if I'd done it in 2016, it would have been, if I'm very honest, it would have been, yay, kind of look at me. And by 2019, I'd lost that sense of the ego around it. And it was more about what's possible and, the fundraising and the litter picking. And it was more about serving the idea of it was just less ego. Yeah, I think the first time, I think maybe I needed that those 3 years just to appreciate life and realize that it was more about serving the memory of those friends and serving the idea that life is so short and precious, as I say, rather than taking life for granted. I think if I did it in 2016, I would have just taken it for granted. It would have been like, I'm just doing this other thing. I did this thing 2 years ago. I'm just doing this other thing now. And it's all great, great, great. I really needed those 3 years just to really just really understand life a bit more and have that sense of gratitude and purpose, and less about me and more about that. I think, I just think there was a different motivation. And so, when people said to me, well, really, you're going to do that thing that you thought about 3 years ago, and you're going to go further, and the canals are a bit grubby and all this, it was like, yep, going to do it. And your problem with that is, then I would go and sit in the car and go, oh my God, how did I say that? Don't get me wrong. I still doubted myself the whole, until I got to the final bit. I still doubted myself, but I still thought, well, I'm going to have a go anyway.
So you took 2 weeks off work in the summer, hoping that it was going to be really lovely and sunny, I imagine.
Yeah, because July. Yeah,
of course.
I took 8 days off work. And so I left on the Saturday, and I was due back in work on the sort of week on Thursday afterwards. I give myself 11 days to do it and a day's rest and recovery, and then I go back to work on the Thursday. It rained the first 2 or 3 days, which actually was really quite good for the fundraising, because I think people were like, you're going to stop, aren't you? And I was like, no, I'm not a professional adventurer here. I have to go back to work. So I have to carry on. And that helped with the publicity. And it's incredible, 11 days, how it can change your life. You think you need 3 months, massive adventure, but actually 11 days.
And it was on your doorstep as well. It's not like you have to go miles and miles away from your home.
No. And I think, so the filmmaker, Brit, he and I wanted us to talk about, at one point, the film was going to be called Adventure on Your Doorstep. But I think because it came hot on COVID came hot on the heels as we were making the film. So we made the film remotely during lockdown. I think everybody had discovered Adventure on Your Doorstep. So we weren't saying anything that people hadn't already discovered or rediscovered. But no, I slept in my bed. I can't remember, I think 3 nights, because the canal came through the town where I live. So it was on our doorstep. It was on my doorstep, and it was like it was a different world. It was amazing.
So you were on your paddleboard, you were rowing in the canals. So you were raising money for a charity, and you're also raising awareness of plastic.
Yeah. So I was picking up litter and raising money for the 2 Minute Beach Clean Foundation, which encourages all of us to take 2 minutes each day to pick up litter, and raising money for the Wave Project, which is a surf therapy charity for children, to teach them. It's not about teaching them to become great surfers per se, but it's about resilience and hope, and knowing that there's adults who have their back and that sort of thing. And picking up litter along the way, and just each night talking about what we found, the similarities, the differences. So yes, it was.
And were you planning on making a film out of it, or how did that come about?
So I had shared that I was going to do this adventure, and I had met Frit at an adventure festival the year before, and then when I announced on my Instagram that I was going to do it, Frit got in touch and said, would you like someone to make a film? And I thought, oh well, they'll just come for like, a couple of days and get really bored of me, some middle-aged woman going on about all my menopausal aches and pains and things, and why I kept forgetting things, and dropping my phone and all this sort of, my head was very much menopausal brain foggy at that time, and we struck up this friendship, and then made this 40-minute feature-length film, actually 55-minute film, and then it cut 40 minutes for festivals, and it's been shown at really prestigious film festivals, as a sort of standalone film, and extraordinary. So never knew that would happen, but I think we wanted to be honest about the adventure and what it's like to be middle-aged, and it just seemed to hit a nerve with people. So it was an extraordinary experience. I think I'm very honest about things.
Well, I think there were a few moments, as I said at the beginning, which really sort of struck me, One of them was the weather was horrendous on
Mm.
certain days, and how you, particularly at the end, it was absolutely torrential. It was lightning and thunder.
Yeah.
And the other was obviously was you were paddleboarding through the real weedy green
Yeah.
sludge. But there
Yeah.
were a couple of moments where you, on those really down, challenging moments where you, with the lavender, which which happened, which was kind of reminded you of your mum, and then the rainbow at the end. So I wonder if you might just tell us about those, because honestly, those bits really made me cry. They were very emotional.
Yeah. So my mum, when she was dying in hospital, we had, a good 10 days as she sort of slowly declined. And there wasn't room for her in a hospice, so she was given sort of like a room on her own. And I would go to work, and then I'd go and sort of stay the night with her and share it with my sister and my dad. And she said to us when she was lucid, if you ever see a rainbow, smell lavender, or see a white feather, you'll know that I'm with you. And she wanted to cover all bases. And so on the canal, you see white feathers all the time because there are swans. But as I came into Leeds, there was like a thunderstorm, and the air just sort of whipped up. And just outside Leeds, there was this bank of lavender near the Canal and River Trust building. And so I smelt that, which was extraordinary, because I was coming to the first part, the Liverpool Leeds section, before moving onto the river. So it was all quite emotional. And so, when I arrived in Leeds, I just sort of smelt this lavender and then burst into tears. And then as we finished, it had been a beautiful, beautiful sunny day. The wind had, for the first time, had been behind my back. And then about 5 minutes outside Goole, it just turned to this huge thunderstorm, like massive, big, fat drops of rain. And a friend of mine, Emma, came and joined me for the last 5 minutes. And, I couldn't get my cagoule on quick enough, and everything just went wrong. And then as I got into Goole, 5 minutes later, these two massive rainbows came out, and it was just like really odd. And my dad was there, and he said, "Did you see the rainbows?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "I think it was your mum." And I said, "Yeah, your mother." That's how he said, "I think it was your mother." And I said, "Yeah, I think it was," which is amazing. And Frit and I often say, when we first met, Frit was a photographer for this festival that we were at. I was wearing this cream jumper with like rainbows down the side, and it was sort of meant to be that 2 years later, we would be together making a film and a rainbow at the end. So and then at the end of the film, I'm sort of crying and speaking to camera and kind of holding back the tears. And I think people thought, oh, well, it's just the emotion of it, but this rainbow was just extraordinary. And then I went on TV, and the interviewer was like, "Wow, you really made it dramatic at the end." And I was like, "No, that was not, I wasn't having it up, I promise. That was, genuine, just overwhelm, really, that, mum was there." So that's typical of my mum. She'd make sure she'd make herself known.
Your boys must be so proud. They must have been so proud at the end when you achieved that.
Yeah. So I had definitely, I like to think so, but they don't.
Oh, I know. I've got two boys. Yes, exactly. They probably they would have been, maybe they didn't show it.
Yeah. So I had deliberately done it when they were both doing other things. So they were both traveling and doing their own thing. Because Johnny had just done his A levels, and Hen would have been he would have been either just finishing his masters, I think. And so I wanted them to know that I would be fine kind of without them at home. So I did it when I couldn't sort of bring them in on it. And I do remember having a conversation as I came out of Leeds, and we were on the sort of family WhatsApp, me and the boys and my sister. And Johnny was traveling somewhere in Europe, and there was something happening with his friends. Maybe splitting the bill over dinner, or, one of those things. I remember standing on my paddleboard, just, putting my 2 pennies worth in on this WhatsApp conversation, and then looking up and realizing I was coming to this area where they, like a barrier that scooped up all the sort of litter. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to go now. Bye. Otherwise I'm just going to get caught up in all this, in this sort of barrier thing. And so, yeah, I think I just told them, I said I did it, and they're like, oh, that's great, so I guess yeah, I think they are, but they don't sort of show it.
The other thing which really struck me watching your film was, I mean, you've called it brave, that's the title of it, but you were so brave. Some of those tunnels you had to go through were quite long and dark. You had to go over some very low bridges as well. So there were some real challenging points. I mean, were you scared? Were you terrified
I'm
a lot of
quite
the time?
dark. So the first tunnel's it's not too far, like 400 meters. I always get confused whether it's 400 meters or 400 yards, but anyway, that was and my friend was there at the end, and she was sort of like going, duh, 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 she's here. And the second one was hard, so that's a mile long, and that is quite a long way to park. And also there's some swans at the end, which can be quite territorial. Understandably, they're swans. So I was a bit scared of that one, and my dad had been really sort of worrying me, and I was like, Dad, it'll be fine. But underneath, I was actually genuinely quite scared about that one. The bridges I had trained for, and what was amazing, if you think about the one that you probably see in the film, like a really low one where you have to lie on your tummy, and then you have to sort of put your head to the side so that the sort of metal bars underneath just kind of touch your face. And it depends on the water levels. But I did that one about 10 o'clock at night, in the dark. I'd never paddled in the dark before like that, but I had just decided at 9 o'clock I'd got to one place, and some friends had joined me, and they said, Jo, we can take you home. You'll be in your bed at 10. And I was like, no, I want to paddle into Skipton at night, and sort of that's the goal I've set myself. It'll be 24 miles worth of paddling that day, and I want to set myself that goal. And I just went under this bridge like at 10 o'clock at night, and I think it was just practice. When you think about footballers or rugby players, and they just practice and practice and practice, and then at that moment in the final, they score the goal. And I guess I had just practiced and practiced, and I just knew where to go at night. And there was fairy lights on the towpath, there was fairy lights on the narrow boats, and just arrived in Skipton. And it wasn't about being brave at that point. I think it was just about really living that dream, really throwing myself into it, and thinking I'm never gonna, this is an opportunity that I'm just to see what I'm made of, but also just to fully experience it, like fully feel alive. And I just remember paddling in and just thinking, this is extraordinary. And then, so it was like, by this time, about 20 past 10. And as I came through into Skipton Basin, there's a narrow boat, and there's a chap on the narrow boat. And he obviously didn't expect a paddleboarder to be paddling past. And he was naked. And I looked down and I saw this naked man. And he was like, what? And I was like, oh, I didn't see that. I'm so sorry. It was just one of those funny little things that, the whole of it was something you couldn't buy. You could only experience, you could only live this moment. And yeah, it all just sort of, just so much serendipity. So yeah, and I just realized sometimes in life, you can't force things. You just have to allow moments like that to happen.
What would you say were your biggest takeaways, your biggest learnings from the whole experience?
I would say that sometimes, like I say at the end, I had been, like many women, had been forced to be brave. Being a single mum, losing your mum, divorce, all these things had forced me to be brave. But I'd never stood up and said, I want to be brave and do something that I don't know if I can do, but I'm going to tell people that I'm going to do it even before I know I can do it. Mm-hmm. Because with the rowing, there was no doubt I never had a doubt with the rowing that I was going to complete it, mainly because obviously all I needed to do was just keep going and doing it. But I think I was just so driven by grief that there was never going to, I contacted my MP to say, do you want to come and see me row? Like, I was just like absorbed. And he was like, okay, bizarre. But with this, it was like raising my head above the parapet and saying, look, I'm going to try something. And to raise money, I needed to tell people that I was going to do it before I knew I could do it. And so that was something. But also, I just think that it is about just getting to the start line and being brave enough to give yourself the chance to fulfill a dream. Yeah. And I think as you get older, you worry less about what other people will think. And you are more internally driven. I think the menopause can crush you like it did me, but then once you rebuild yourself, it's a really internal confidence rather than an external validation. And if you're driven by an internal confidence, it will take you a lot further because you're not waiting for other people to say, hey, that's great, you can do it. So I think that was it, just having that spark of a dream and just giving yourself over to that dream. And community, I didn't think anybody would want to be part of it. But now there have been, which is great. There's 3 women have done it this year. 1 did it last year. So this year, there was 2 women together and 1 on her own, and they made it really community things. People came along and joined them, and I never thought anybody would want to be with me because I thought they'd be really bored of me. But if I did something else like that again, I think understanding that community is really important and people want to support you. But also just allowing for serendipity in life. I think that's. Yeah, and now if I've got a project for next year, and instead of trying to force it, I'm going to allow to see what happens. And I did that with my first book. I allowed, and with my second book, I just allowed for moments that I couldn't ever envisage would happen, and they did, because I left room for that. I think that's a really lovely thing to do, is just allow room for serendipity and allow room for moments that you can never ever imagine, and they will happen, and you don't know when they'll happen. They're so magical.
I love it. Yeah, it's like it's not worrying about the how and just think things will just work themselves out, because they always tend to do. Yeah. In terms of your confidence, because I'm just going back to this because again, I just think so many people listening will be like, but I could never do that sort of thing because I've got no confidence. Yeah. I mean, would you say, and for me, this is how I have experienced it for myself, and I can see through other people, that confidence is something that you practice, and by doing the things, it builds little by little by little. It's not something you just get, it's by actually doing. And I imagine that was the same for you.
Yeah, it is. It's a bit like a muscle that you use it once and you go, oh, okay, maybe I'll use it again and I'll get a bit stronger. And yes, it's not a natural inclination. I don't naturally feel confident, but I can look back and say, well, I did that, so maybe I can do this. Or when I get fearful about doing something, like we're editing my book, and when my editor sends back, so my second book, when my editor sort of sends back and says, can you just check this? Part of me wants to go, oh my God, I don't want to read this. I can't do this. And then I go, Jo, this is your work. She's just trying to make it the best it can be. From her perspective. And so it's just, I then have to go back to myself and say, Jo, you just open the document, read the document, and sometimes it is literally taking it step by step. Literally I have to, even any element of anything I do now is okay, just do something to start it, because if I've done something to start it, all I need to do is the next bit to move it on, and it's often that starting is the hardest bit, isn't it?
It is. It's that initial moment of courage that is the hardest thing. But once you find, and that you kind of do need to find from somewhere within. But once you found that bit of courage, then everything falls into place. That you just move on.
Yeah, and I remember there's a film called We Bought a Zoo with Matt Damon, and in it he says all you need is 20 seconds. I mean, I think it was about asking someone on a date, but all you need is 20 seconds of embarrassing bravery. And so sometimes I'll do that, literally I'll think I just need 20 seconds to open this document and look at it, or 20 seconds to send this email to someone, and then I'll often just start an email, maybe to say, oh, I'd like to speak at your festival, or would you like to collaborate or whatever, and I'll open it and I'll just spend 20 seconds writing a draft, and then I'll close it again, and then I'll think, later, okay, I just need to do another 20 seconds of that draft and just move it on until I've spent 5 minutes, lots of 20 seconds, maybe a whole minute. And then I just send it off and I go, that's it. There's nothing more I need to do now. So
yes, I love that so much, because we're all so good, aren't we, of like avoiding certain things which make us feel it's that getting you comfortable with that uncomfortable feeling, which we all have, and actually just doing it.
It's like, I know I've got to do my tax return, so I'll spend 20 seconds saying to my accountant, it will be there by this date.
Exactly.
It gets that every year, and then I know that I've opened that project, like 20 seconds, I've opened that project, and now all I need to do is just go the next step and then the next step, and it will be done. But that 20 seconds can be the hardest. But if you say, right, I'm only going to do it for 20 seconds, we can all just about find enough courage for 20 seconds. So
exactly. So Jo, you've mentioned your first book and then your second book, so just tell us a little bit about these projects, what is coming next.
So my first book was about paddleboarding in beautiful places around England, Scotland and Wales, and that came out last year, and is doing super well, which is lovely. And then I wrote another book last year, which we then decided not to publish. So that was a big learning curve. And that was a learning curve for me in trusting my gut. And the publishers were like, you've just written a book and you're telling us we shouldn't publish it. That is very odd. But I knew it wasn't the right book for the market or paddleboarding. And they now realize I was completely right, which was very, very, that's probably the bravest thing I've ever done creatively. And now I have just submitted a book, which I'm really pleased we're going to publish, which is about paddleboarding in the Lake District. So basically this summer, around work and family and job and everything like that, I've been up in the Lake District researching beautiful places to paddleboard there. And we're in the edit section now. And that will come out in May next year. And then and my whole project, I haven't really shared it, but I'll share it with you. You can kind of be the first. I'm going to basically walk from bookshop to bookshop in the Lake District, and do sort of like a book tour that way, but also walk from lake to lake and just show people the lakes. Because I always see when I research my books, I see the lake from the lake, the water side. I'm going to kind of climb a little bit up, say Cat Bells, and then say, right, this is Derwent Water and that's Derwent Isle, and here's some stories about that, and that's St Herbert's Island, and here's some stories about that, and this is where Beatrix Potter used to come for the summer holidays, and just really build upon that knowledge I have of the lakes, but in a walking way and a swimming way and a bit of paddleboarding. So that's my project for next year, and hopefully I'll meet some really lovely people and stay in lovely campsites and youth hostels and things, and just really build upon the knowledge that I've learned this year about the lakes. So, but leave lots of room for serendipity.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it sounds amazing. I would absolutely love to come along to this. I love that part of the world, and
it is.
Paddleboarding on those lakes must be unbelievable.
I've got if somebody sends me a picture of them paddleboarding in the lakes, I literally will go, okay, right, I can see that there. I'll be like, I'm not quite giving them the OS coordinates, but I am literally saying, is that there? And they're like, yes, Jo.
Amazing. Well, Jo, I wish you all the best with all of that. Oh, my last question, which I do ask all my guests, which I nearly forgot. Because this is called the Positive Perimenopause Podcast, I do like to leave our listeners with one practical, actionable takeaway, which they can put into practice. What might you say to them?
The biggest overall is to put yourself on the priority list. Like, you just have, if you need permission, you have permission, but just put yourself on the priority list. The two things that have made the biggest difference for me are moving. I don't even call it exercise, I just call it moving my body, and making sleep a massive priority. Like, I have been known to leave book clubs and dinners because it's getting too late for me, and I'll go, I'm so sorry, I've got to go to bed now. So moving and sleep, and make sleep, something that is just really important to you. And I know not everybody, I used to have I'd get to sleep and then I'd wake at 4, but whatever you need to do to try and get yourself through the night is I function on sleep. That's everything about my life.
Exactly. When you have a good night's sleep, the
whole
world seems so much better.
Everything works out. Yeah.
Thank you. And what we haven't really talked on, but we'll save it for another time, is the joy that of finding something that you love to do. And I think, again, I suppose it ties in with everything we've talked about in that, particularly at this midlife point. It's so important to find things which bring you that joy, as you have done, you found with paddleboarding. So thank you so much, Jo. It's been a complete pleasure. Your story is just so inspirational, and I'm sure it will be to so many. So thank you for coming and sharing it with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Here are some of the takeaways. Number 1, it's easy to lose touch with what brings you joy, especially when life gets busy or challenging. Take the time to excavate and rediscover the things that bring you joy and fulfillment. Number 2, the real achievement in fulfilling your dreams is if you can get yourself to the start line, then the rest will follow. Number 3, surround yourself with people who support your goals and dreams. Community plays a crucial role in providing encouragement and motivation. Number 4, instead of trying to control every aspect of your life, allow room for serendipity. Sometimes the best experiences happen when you're open to unexpected opportunities. Number 5, building confidence is a gradual process. Take it step by step, and remember that every 20 seconds of bravery can move you forward. Trust that you can find the courage you need. Number 6, put yourself on your priority list. Take care of your physical and mental health by moving your body and making sleep a significant priority. And number 7, if you have the spark of a dream, go for it. You should try it, no matter your age or circumstances. Embrace your passions and the things that make your heart sing. You just never know where it may lead. I totally forgot to ask Jo to share how you can find out more about her at the end of this episode. So I will put all of her details into the show notes. So I'll put her website, her podcast, so you can find out more about her there. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have enjoyed this podcast as much as I enjoyed speaking to Jo. If you have enjoyed it, then why not share it with a friend who also might enjoy it? And if you wanted to just do one small thing for me, I'd be so grateful if you could come over to wherever you listen to your podcasts and subscribe and like this podcast. It makes a big difference to how this podcast gets out there. And if you feel called, I would be even more grateful if you could just spend a couple of minutes writing a review for me. The best place really for this is on Apple Podcasts. It really does help this podcast get out there. And it just helps me get better guests. It helps me to continue to put out these weekly episodes. So I'd be so grateful. Thank you again for listening. I know how busy you are. I really do hope that this episode may have inspired you to perhaps take that spark of a dream and to do something with it, because I promise you it is never ever too late. And remember, this week, try and find a moment to do something for yourself, whatever that might be, but find that time, because it is so important. You absolutely deserve it. That's it for this week. Take loads of care, lots and lots of love, and I look forward to speaking to you next time. Bye.